I was there. I don't have to listen to it.
This week's show because it was a disaster.
When you live in a beach resort, it's easy to forget whether you are playing or working. On each week's show, we settle in with a cocktail and try to figure out if there is a difference. This is Day Drinking on Delmarva.
I was like, hey, you want to do this live? And I'm like, sure.
I am
wonderful. Sorry.
I am Todd from GoodCleanFunLife.com.
And I am Tony Russo, no relation, and you're listening to Day Drinking on Delmarva, a look at life and culture here on the Delmarva Peninsula. We are broadcasting from the Crowbar in Berlin, an excellent secret spot. I am flabbergasted.
I tricked you.
You totally tricked me. For those of you who are listening and enjoying the airplane that I guess just landed next to my house, Todd put a new trailer. What comes up? A new introduction onto the front of the video portion of this show, which you can find where?
You can find it online at Good Clean Fun Life's Facebook page. Why is this so hard for me? That on our Facebook page and also on our YouTube, GCFL.
There you go.
Yeah.
And if I can go ahead and comment on that. So one of the things that he did was he added a video portion of mostly me talking and him listening, which is true. I mean, it's not like he took a shot at me or anything.
It's kind of how the show goes. Right?
It really is kind of how the show goes. But I was so unprepared for it that I complimented him when we came on rather than just starting the show like a professional.
Right.
But that's okay. I'll dock my pay for the week.
Yes. I'm tricking you. I've held back a couple things. I also think that we should drink more during the show. You know, this is Day Drinking on Delmarva, and you know, I think when we need to start our pre-show with a cocktail and then go into the show with another one.
I don't have any strong objections to that.
Especially as we're headed coming into, you know, sober September, we got to double down for all of our weak friends.
Exactly. And each week we have a sponsor. Our sponsor is the liquor that we're drinking or the alcohol that we're drinking because no one else has sponsored us. But if you want to sponsor us, send us some booze or send us some money to drink some booze. Happy to do that. And along your lines, I'm drinking what I call diet punishment juice.
Diet punishment.
So
is that because you're punishing yourself for being on a diet, or it is
the punishment of being on a diet? It is astounding how many calories are in alcohol.
Yeah.
Especially when you start looking, which is probably the reason I stopped looking and put on a bunch of weight. And so now as a punishment, I have to lose a bunch of weight, and I don't have a lot of other calories to give that aren't booze. I eat pretty well, but I just drink better. So I call this a punishment cocktail. And what it is I drop a shot of, in this case, it's gin, but sometimes it's vodka, and it's never good or brown, into an ice shaker, and I just leave it there. Let it get watered down, and that is how this is. I don't know how much more alcohol there is in this than in your standard IPA.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's punishment juice, but it's quite tasty. I always put a drop of absinthe in it because it gives it a nice little zing and gives it some bottom. But I'm sponsored by, Fat Boy Punishment Juice.
That would be a very marketable thing, I think. Fat Boy Punishment Juice.
That is going to be the name of the show. That's the title of this episode.
My punishment juice is something wonderful and brown. This is Burning Chair bourbon. It was actually gifted to me by Kate Nichols and Claudia, no last name, of Stage 4 Klinger fame. The other podcast that I produce with them that is much more successful than this podcast.
Is she working to keep her name a secret? That seems weird.
It is funny. It's kind of the ongoing gag is that, you know, because she's a 60-year-old lady, she doesn't want, you know, she still thinks that she has to have anonymity on the internet.
I think it's amusing that once you've said anything out loud on the internet, you think you can maintain your
Right.
anonymity.
Exactly. And the fact that it is the podcast is billed as a mother-daughter podcast, and Kate gives her last name every time.
Oh,
So it's a running gag. But yeah, so she got me this burning chair bourbon, and I had a little bit of it over the weekend by myself sitting on the porch. It was very, very pleasant. And being true to, and this is the second part of Fat Boy Punishment Juice, is that not only am I going to drink this wonderful bourbon in front of you, which is quite good, but I also have the old standard, which is Sea Heathen by Burley Oak. So I got a beer and a whiskey.
Oh, how exciting.
So double down for my weak friends.
Yeah. So just real quick, that's probably 800 calories right there.
Yeah, man. That's okay. I haven't had lunch yet.
I get 1900 a day, which is not a lot for a person my size. All sorts of cool things to get to. But before we do want to invite you, for those of you who can't see the awesome crawl line on our video for our listeners, you can follow us on the internet. Where can they find us, Todd?
Over at Instagram at Day Drinking on Delmarva. Excuse me. But yeah, we have a little Instagram page. We are we're in the business of only outgoing messaging on Facebook. So what we'd like to do is steer people over to Instagram, and I think that'd be a fun place to share pictures. I posted last week's the birthday episode. We talked about the Black Manhattan.
Right.
After the show, I went and had the Black Manhattan, and I posted that up on our Instagram page. So yeah, go check it out, follow us, interact, have fun, all that good stuff.
And each week we also start off with you don't also start off with anything. It's one of the weird transition words. You throw also in there instead of and a lot of times it works, but sometimes you throw also in there and you're saying, I'm not really following up on that thought. Here, I'm going to say something else. That's what I should have said.
And in other news.
Yeah, right. In other news, each week we also talk about one cool thing that happened to us because we live here or as a result of us living here or to us generally. And that usually kicks off the conversation. And I'm going to start because I think Todd's is the one that's going to launch us into the more permanent conversation for the show. And mine was that I injured myself. I injured myself getting in shape, which is how so many people injure themselves. But I did mine in a worse way than I think makes sense. So I've been walking every morning, and I'm not pushing it. I used to swim, but now, the YMCA is disease ridden, or I'm sorry, I'm afraid that the YMCA may be disease ridden. I'm really doing the social distancing thing as seriously as I can. So I've taken to walking. By the way, I also didn't close my YMCA membership, and I'm a little proud of that because I'm going to probably not go back for a year. I'm going to probably have paid for a year and a half that I didn't use the gym. But I know that, it's one of the few Christian organizations that I feel like does a really good job sharing the wealth. So if they're counting on the $18 or whatever extra a year that I pay to fund somebody else who can't pay the whole thing to go to the gym or swim lessons or something like that. Huge fan of that. Anyway, so I've just been walking around the block once a day. But my knees have been hurting. And the reason my knees have been hurting is because I don't stretch. I hate stretching. And that is the dumbest thing. Besides, I hate not smoking. It's hard to say anything dumber than I hate stretching. Like, there are really very few things that are pretty roundly accepted by there's no goofball theory on the planet that says stretching is bad for you. More people believe smoking is good for you than believe stretching is bad for you. And now they'll argue over what kind of stretching is good. And I get that. If there's a fact, people have to argue about it. But the point is, stretching is good. And when I stretch my quads, when I stretch my thigh and calf muscles together in that little hooky thing you do when you pull your foot back up, it relieves the pressure on my knees because I weigh a lot and all my muscles are tense all the time, and they're pulling my calf to my shin, essentially trying to crush my thigh to my shin, trying to crush my knee. And that is where the pain comes from. So I decided that I was going to be a grown-up about it and start stretching, and that I was going to do a little bit of stretching every hour. And so I did. And then I couldn't walk on my left leg for 3 days. I must have torn or popped or something like that in the knee. My wife said I should go to the doctor. And what I told my wife was, if I go to the doctor, they're going to say, stay off it for 2 weeks. So, I'm going to start by staying off it for 2 weeks. And if that doesn't work, I'll go to the doctor.
Right.
But the other really
classic man move right there.
But the other really interesting thing about being on crutches, which I haven't actively been on crutches since I think since I was like a kid, is it's a good workout. So I think that after my left knee gets better, I'm going to stop using my right leg, and I'm just going to scamper around on these crutches until I lose the 50 pounds that I really have to lose in an emergency at this point.
Yeah.
So that was my one cool thing. I found out a new exercise, calling it crutching it. I think I'll make a video crutching it with Tony Russo.
I think you absolutely should make that video. Also, two of the most important movements that you can do in general is squatting and bending over. So, you can even start with that as you're crutching it and working on bending over, and even just like sitting and getting back up. This is the minimal movement.
One of the other things that I was doing back before I was crippled, back before the accident. One of the things that I was doing was trying to pick things up with my left hand more. I have a tendency to pick up everything with my right hand. So as a result, I can touch my feet with my right hand. I can put on shoes with my right hand. I can barely scratch my knee with my left hand. So that other turning point needed to be fixed. So like that kind of kinetic extra, like you say, bending down and things like that.
Bending down.
Yeah. Weight loss with Tony Russo. Sponsored by Fat Boy Punishment Juice.
Well, I'm feeling pretty good about a couple of the projects that we're working on, and had my one cool thing this week, which is, it's one of the I've thought about holding on to it because it's a project that we're working on down here at the shore, and it involves local history, and it involves local artists, two local artists. So there's so many aspects to it, but so this is the teaser, and this is what was cool this week. I am currently working with Brian Russo, no relation, on a music project, which has become a music history project, which I was able to get my son involved in. And so then there's like this education aspect, this is a lot of the talk that's happening right now because of what's going on in the world and people going back to school and fall creeping in and that sort of thing. But, just a brief overview, that Brian Russo wrote a song about Reverend, I always want to say Tillman, Reverend Tindley, who is from Worcester County on the Eastern Shore. And there is a painting that was done by Patrick Henry of Reverend Tindley that was meant to hang in the Worcester County Library. And he did it back in 1983. At that time, he did paintings for...
At that time in Worcester County, it was still illegal to hang pictures up of Black people. Continue.
Spoilers, Tony.
You also have to say the famous song that he wrote, because it's escaping my name.
So he wrote what was basically the inspiration for "We Shall Overcome,"
right,
as well as "Stand By Me," which were two sermons that were turned into hymns that were turned into popular songs. And "We Shall Overcome," of course, was the civil rights anthem, and basically the story is a kid born with nothing, taught himself to read and write, became a tremendous leader in his community and in his church, and then created stuff that traveled the world over. And he's from Worcester County. And it's a really neat project. There'll be plenty of aspects that I'll probably get into on later dates, but the coolest thing was that we were interviewing a bunch of people involved in the Black churches over here in Berlin, and Patrick's son, who's starting a magazine here on the Eastern Shore. And I asked my son to come along to help with the process of interviewing all of these fine folks. And, he's taking a music production class. He's smart about a lot of things and a very technical person, but to kind of have him introduced into this project, like I said, which is an art project meets a music meets a history project,
right?
I think was really well-rounding for him. And the coolest thing is he's like, I just left my, I asked him, we were there for a little while, and I asked him, have you heard from Mom, making plans for, afternoon or lunch or whatever. And he's, I left my phone at home. I figured I was going to be with you the whole time. So not only did he come and was incredibly helpful, he was able to, have a little conversation with Pat Henry, whom I love, who I think is a great influence. And he wasn't distracted the whole time on his phone, texting with his friends or anything like that. So that was my one cool thing. I felt like it was like a proud parent moment. Maybe I've done something right in all of the random ideas that I've thrown at parenting.
I believe that we're entering kind of like a new habitual thing where people are beginning to be conscious of their relationship with their phones. Something as simple as, depending upon how seriously I'm working, I'll turn my phone face down or face up.
Right.
That's a habit.
Right. Yeah.
Right. That I didn't used to have. I used to have the phone and it binged, do what it says. But now I turn it upside down and I'm working. And if anybody needs me, they'll call me. And if anybody texts me, they'll wait until I'm done doing what I'm doing. And it's just a simple habit that I started. And increasingly, I see people pointedly, they're like looking at their phones, say, why am I looking at this? And pointedly, putting it away. So
yes. Yeah.
I think with any luck, it'll become, a normal tool in another 15 years. Plus everybody will be looking at their, magic eyeballs by then.
Right.
So.
Just blinking behind, like, I'm looking right at you, Tony, but I'm actually watching this YouTube video. I agree. And I've talked about it, and I hate to sound preachy, but this one-way Facebook communication for me, I have found, some of the unintended consequences of just like having more bandwidth to consume other things or focus on other things and not go down either the mindless hole. I mean, there's still plenty of mindless stuff that I do, of course. But it's more topical, and it's more the mindless stuff that I do.
One of the things that I like to say is, now that I'm not using Facebook with any regularity, I have to make an effort to waste time where it used to just come naturally to me.
Yeah. And I do think, and I think that is something. And I think a lot of people, especially right now, with what's going on in, the divisiveness of politics and that sort of thing, is people are more willing to unplug from their devices, and maybe other vices, but for us, not drinking so much. So.
No. I'm, like I said, I invented a drink to help curtail my drinking. So I don't know how committed you are, but that's how committed I am. Before the show, we were talking, and there's no good way to segue into it, but it is a fun thing to talk about 20 minutes in, is it is. So I used to write about beer sometimes. Oh, I actually have a beer story that I forgot from my one cool thing. So this goes nicely as well.
Okay.
I used to be a beer writer. I'm not a beer writer anymore, strictly speaking. There are lots of reasons for that. The main reason is that I don't have the energy to do it, and I don't have the craving interest to do it in the way that I used to. As I've mentioned it on here before, I would love it if you listen to my beer podcast, though, Beer with Strangers, where I do small histories of local places. I think that's fascinating. And I love craft beer. I just don't want to cover it as a news beat anymore.
Right.
And along those lines, yesterday, for the first time ever, I had a journalist call and ask my impression about beer. And I said, I cannot help you.
Really?
Yeah, but he asked a very pointed question, and I'll get into it as we go. They're doing. I am not knocking anyone at all. I swear. There is this worthwhile and useful interest in trying to find the Black part of every story. And let me preface this. When I was a history major, and this was back at the turn of the century, when I was taking history classes, the way the history class would go is they'd say, okay, this is the history. So yes, I know. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday this is the history section we're talking about. Thursday, this is what that history was like for Black people. Friday, this is what this history was like for women, right? And at the time, it bothered me that they hadn't integrated it yet, that they hadn't just said, this is the history. But I realized that they were working from zero texts. There weren't cohesive stories that didn't break out the African-American experience, that didn't break out the woman experience. And that's where we are, I think, in the rest of media today.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we still don't know how to cover the United States.
Yeah.
But we can say, hey, this is what's going on. And look, this is what Black people are doing. And look, this is what women are doing.
Yeah.
And it's not negative, but when you see it and it feels ham-handed, just remember it takes a little effort to start to change the way you think about culture into pieces of culture instead of sexually and racially divided chunks of time. Right?
It takes time for that to meld together.
Just the way you do things, because like all those historians were saying, okay, here's the history, here's for Black people, here's for women. Eventually they said, here's the history, and they would just put the women and Black stories in with the rest of the history where it belonged. But there was a transitional period where that wasn't really done. Right. I hope to Christ it's changed by now, but maybe it hasn't.
It hasn't, because we're talking about this project, and I come across a 1983 or actually Brian sent me an article. I didn't come across it. I did no research. Brian sends me an article, and it's like, I'm aghast at, this Howard University study about Worcester County. And I'm like, it's really sad that I feel like, part of Woodward and Bernstein just now learning that there was racism in 1983. In
right. I'm sorry. When I was making fun, that's not why they didn't hang the picture up, is it?
It is 100% why they didn't hang the picture up. And that's spoilers. That is what this is most likely. I mean, it was never verbalized.
Wow. Well, the fact that it was my first guess makes me think you're probably on the right track.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah. Stay tuned.
That's fantastic and also insane.
Yeah.
I forgot what I was even talking about. That blew my mind so much.
I'm going to tell you in a second, but more spoilers. We may be renaming the convention center after this story comes out.
Will it be renamed Black People Aren't Welcome Convention Center?
I'm laughing at the wrong spot. Just so you know. Brutal. You were talking about beer and I was finding the Black story of beer.
Exactly. And I was asked a question about Black brewers. And I know enough about Black brewers to sound like someplace between a moron and an ignorant racist. So I decided not to comment. The very little I do know, the thing about the difficulty of getting, it used to be anyway, the difficulty of getting people of color and women into brewing is that it's not just that it's a ferocious boys club, you know, and it's not just that 60% of brewery owners are former frat boys, although that helps. You know, the problem is that they don't feel welcome in the places anyway. They're not called to participate in craft beer. But those who have been, I mean, there are so many successful women brewers and so many successful, not so many, there are a number of really successful brewers of color. And even a couple, 3 women brewers of color who are just knocking it out of the park. If you're interested in the black beer scene, in so much as it's still called the black beer scene instead of the craft beer scene. See, I just did it. Literally just did it.
Is it Friday?
Check out Afro Beer Chick on Twitter.
Oh.
She pays attention to the cultural and racial implications of beer, and also knows a fuck ton about beer. So follow her for the beer, follow her for the kookiness. But she's one of the people who, and that's why I'm repeating pretty much her Twitter feed. Me repeating her Twitter feed.
Yeah.
Is the extent of my knowledge about black brewing.
You're really woke.
Also, except that I did do an interview with some UMES students who brewed a beer at Doug's Place. Back when Beer with Strangers was there. We had them on the show.
Doug's Place being Extreme Brewing, which is closed. But we had them on the show, and I have a story up about them. And they were restaurant students, and for their senior project, they had to invent a restaurant. And their hook was they were going to invent a brew pub. And part of their project was they came over to Extreme Brewing and made their own beer. They made their own beer. They made their own labels. They made their own marketing plan. And the idea that the idea was that a large part of this restaurant was going to be supported by the brew pub because they were going to bottle in addition to just serve at the bar. Nice.
It's a huge, I mean, that's what Dogfish does.
Right.
It works.
It's what Burley does.
It still totally works.
Yeah.
So, and I said, I can send you the one article I've written about black people in brewing, and they were students and they were just learning. But the student who was heading the project did hope to open a brewery, and it was about 4 years ago. So, you know, maybe they can check in with him and see how he was doing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's my story about me not being a beer writer anymore. In case you thought I forgot what I was talking about.
Well, thanks for bringing it full circle. And you know, we were talking a little bit about what is this time of year and education and fall, and the fall creep was my teaser for the pumpkin beers are coming. And you had mentioned that you had now we're already rounding the corner here, so we don't.
That's
have
okay.
Another...
We have a couple 3 minutes, and I'll say quickly that I do have a post set to go that I wrote a couple years ago, but I post it annually on State of the Beer, reposted annually on State of the Beer, updated a little bit, and it's called something like "It's that time of year. Let's start complaining about all the pumpkin beer." I have made this weird transition to the inability to take stuff like that seriously. And so I would love it if the rest of you would join me.
The being upset about it, or
there's a general complaint from beer nerds that that people put out pumpkin beers earlier and earlier each year, and they're not using real pumpkins, and they're forcing it upon people, and it's moving other beers that you might want to otherwise drink off the shelves too early. And not one of them goes on to become a brewer and doesn't do that.
Right. Yeah, good point.
And so
yeah,
everyone, I mean, I gave up on pumpkin beers because I used to be a pumpkin beer advocate. And then that's one of the things, right? I was covering the local area and everybody's like, oh, they're bringing out this pumpkin beer too early. Oh, they're bringing out this pumpkin beer too early. That was really code for they're bringing out so much that I'm not going to be able to get mine on the shelf when it's ready.
Yeah.
And so everybody just started getting it ready earlier so they could get theirs on the shelves. And all of a sudden, it wasn't a complaint. You never hear a brewer complain. There's no brewery on planet Earth that makes pumpkin beer and also complains about pumpkin beer coming out too early. It's not something you hear. It's something you hear from, idiot beer bloggers on the internet.
Beerblogger.012.
Now, this is a caveat that I always used to, a claim that I always used to make, and I'll stand by it because I'm not doing the research. But if you'd like to check out Mississippian Brewing Company and see if they make a pumpkin beer, I don't think they do.
Okay.
The legend with them, the thing that I always admired about them was they not only hated the idea, but they also didn't make a pumpkin beer. They made a gourd beer, sweet potato, I think. They made a sweet potato pie beer that they brought out in November. And they're like, this is what we're going to do.
Right.
And I just don't want to find out that they've changed their minds because that would hurt my feelings a lot. I'm
pretty sure that Burley's along those lines too. There's not a pumpkin beer that I can think of. I mean, maybe no, that's not true. There's for sure a pumpkin dream, but
but that won't be out until like September 3rd.
It'll be out in 2 weeks.
It's a dumb fight to have.
Yeah.
Especially for all the other things. Like if I'm trying to think of something that you do at Christmas time. If I gave you a candy cane today, what would you get outraged?
Yeah.
I guess some people would get outraged. If I imported a watermelon for you and I served watermelon at Thanksgiving dinner, would you lose your fucking mind that I was ruining summer?
Yeah.
Watermelon's not good unless you eat it in July. Otherwise, I hate it. Holy Christ!
Yeah. I think it is interesting that we're in the time that we're in because people are looking forward. Like I think part of the discrediting or part of the angst of the Christmas creep, the fall creep and the pumpkin spice and all of that is that like, no, it's still August. It's still summer. And I think that everybody has a different mindset because of the pandemic, and we've spent a lot of time in small, I, for one, Natalie's making chili tonight. Like that's, we
do have more soup in this. Listen, there's nothing wrong with trying to be calendar correct. I think it's noble, but we don't live in a calendar correct culture. And the fact that it's only pumpkin-y things that get shit over this is what,
there's a lot of other terrible things that happen that are much less offensive than
no one ever says, how dare you put cloves in this? It's already March. Why are you serving me fresh greens? It's the middle of winter. You didn't get fresh greens, you scumbag. I mean, line up. Eat what you like, drink what you like, and be happy. Literally the only thing I can say about that.
Yep. Yeah, no. I can't believe there's tomatoes in December.
Right? No one complains about tomatoes in September. These tomatoes aren't really, they're not really selling this tomato juice from tomatoes that were made recently. They bought tomatoes last year and made tomato juice with them. Oh, all right. Well, now I hate tomato juice.
Right.
Because I don't have a slave squeezing it for me in the kitchen.
Oh man. Way to bring it full circle.
Thank you very much. I just saw it and I could not resist. But we are out of time. We're running a little longer than we generally like to, but booze hit me, so that's good.
Yeah, no, that's fun.
All right, I got nothing left anyway. How about you?
I got nothing.
All right, well, remember, until next time at the beach,
it's happy hour whenever you say it is.
Cheers.